Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today we are going to be talking about my initial impressions of Hexplore Volume 4, the domain of Mirza Noctis. And I wanted to be able to experience a lot of what the game has to offer, so I wanted to be able to at least fight one boss, get some upgrades, and experience some of the dungeon before I gave my initial impressions. And I'm at that point, and so I thought it would be a good time to take a break from playing in order to talk about the game. So just right off the bat, I think I still like Valley of the Dead King more. I think that is still my favorite, solely because it gives me this same kind of experience without as much effort. I get the same, at least close to the same feeling, and it is a easier game to play. However, I do like Domain of Mirza Noctis a lot more than Sands of Shirax, and I really do like this game a lot. It has so much to offer, and it did walk back the main things that I did not like about Sands of Shirax. And Sands of Shirax, I did not like how much of a sandbox it was. I did not like the 4 different wind conditions. I didn't like how the sandworm could destroy places. So you could spend many, many turns trying to get to a place, only to get there and have it be destroyed before you're able to utilize it. And I found that there was a lot of wasted time in Sands of Shirax. It was a game that I feel like did not respect my time as a player. And so that's why I don't like it. I know other people, they say it's their favorite. And so if you're looking for this kind of like wide open sandbox, Sands of Shirax is probably still the way to go. Domain of Mirza Noctis is much more focused than Sands of Shirax. There is one way to win and one way to lose. You win by defeating Mirza Noctis. He's like this vampire lord, and you fight him in one of 2 ways. Either he gains enough blood, and his blood meter, you're going to keep track on his placard here. And as he will be sending his agents out to the villages, and his agents are these collectors, and they're represented by these D3. And they will go out to random villages, and then at the top of each villain phase of the turn, you count up how many pips are showing, and that's how much blood that Mirza Noctis drains from each village. And you add that to his total, and when it reaches 100, he comes to life and you have to fight him. Or before that happens, you can take the battle to him by going to the center of tile G and going to his castle and fighting him. That's probably what you want to do, because as he gains more blood, his abilities will become augmented and he will become stronger. If he reaches 100 blood, then he gets all of his abilities will be augmented, and he has a 10 Aegis. So what this is Aegis is kind of a new system. And in some ways, it simulates ability gating from video games, kind of like Castlevania and Metroid, a Metroidvania or an Igavania. And in a lot of ways, Domain of Mirza Noctis reminds me of a really good board game version of Castlevania. And that is a really good thing. It's like a mix of Castlevania and Diablo. And so I am really liking it because of that. This Aegis ability is pretty cool. Some bosses and some enemies have an orange shield. And that means that you have to have a certain number of gear upgrades in order to even do damage to them while they still have energy. So your ability score doesn't matter when you are fighting an enemy with an Aegis shield unless your gear upgrades have been upgraded enough. So there are ways you kind of have to think about it when you're starting the game, because you can only upgrade your it's hard to get gear upgrades before you go down into a dungeon, because as you unlock crypts to explore dungeons, then the monasteries offer more abilities to buy higher gear upgrades. So there is this kind of push and pull at the beginning of the game to, okay, I need to try to get into a crypt so I can unlock more monastery abilities. But to get into the crypt, you have to have a crypt key. And one of the best ways to get a crypt key is to fight the first boss, which is the Hellhound. But he has an Aegis of 1, so you need to make sure that your attack, that you have at least 1 gear ranking on your attack rating. And when you beat that boss, you do get a crypt key, so you can go down into the crypts to explore, to get more, and so on. And you keep kind of like the unlocking kind of snowballs like it does in a Metroidvania. And I think that is really cool. It gives the game a really neat feeling. Now, I always play Hexplore games with the main map already set up on my table. This game requires a little more house ruling because you do have to cover some certain things up. So they're not revealed yet until you explore that hex. But one of the reasons why I do that, or there are 2 reasons why I like to play with the main board set up. One, I think it speeds up the game because you have you know where things are, so you can route better. You're not revealing these tiles at random, which can prolong some quests. And 2, in this game, you have 2 maps. You have your main overland map, and then you have your underground map of the dungeons. And so I needed, since I'm playing on a small table here, I needed to make sure that I knew where I could set up my small map dungeon, because the dungeon is randomly generated. So I wanted this to be static and have the dungeon to be random. And then I am playing with my heroes off on a side table. So I'm going to show some pictures right now of my heroes. We're going to talk about the heroes a little bit, what I'm playing. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time in the dungeon because this is kind of like the newest thing that Mirza Noctis adds. And it is something that is very, very cool. I love the little dungeon mini game within this game. But let's talk about my characters, the characters that I'm playing right now. So I am playing as a monk. That's my main role is a monk. He is a healer, and his race is an Archon. And in a recent blessing that I got from a power-up, I was able to become blessed by turning in a rune at a monastery. And so I gained this greater aspect. And he is a blessed Archon monk who focuses on healing. Anytime I use an ability in combat, I can heal up to a certain amount. And that is really cool. I can also cleanse, which can help heal a little bit and negate negative abilities. Negative, what are they called in this game? Not keywords, conditions, negative conditions like burn or poison and that kind of stuff. So that comes in really handy. There are a lot of enemies that deal conditions in this game. So it is pretty important to have a way to negate those conditions. He can't really do much damage to enemies. So he is purely a healer, purely kind of a utility healer. And, but I'm really happy to have him in a 2-hero party. My striker, my damage dealer here is the Phosphomancer. So it's kind of a lightmancer. He uses light and manipulates light in order to do damage. And he got a power-up called Damned. So I have a blessed monk and a damned Phosphomancer. And I got Damned. It's a greater aspect by turning in a rune to a crypt. And I'm also a solar elf. And he is a heavy hitter. I've powered him up quite a bit. One of his abilities now, if I use it, so he has 2 abilities, light absorption and magnified beam. And depending on which one I use first and then second, it manipulates the other. But when I'm using my magnified beam after light absorption, I'm doing 20 points of damage already. It seems kind of broken. I'm not sure, but he is a heavy hitter if you spec him out right. And especially with that Damned and that solar elf just really helps with the Phosphomancer. So I did start the game. I did cheat a little bit, but hey, it's my game. I'm playing solo, and I wanted to start with a familiar. So I drew a familiar at random, and my first familiar was a canine, and I named him Podo. and he helps with navigation. So he's really good to have to help you find your way. As those of you who have played Hexplore know, every turn you move a certain number of hexes, and then you have to roll your Explore skill to prevent yourself from getting lost. So Podo helps a lot with that. And then and Podo is the monk's familiar. Then after you beat the Hellhound boss, you get a familiar, you get a Hellhound pup. And so I named him Heli. And Heli is kind of an attack familiar. And so I gave Heli to the damned Phosphomancer. Just super thematic pairing there. I absolutely love it. Okay, so now let's go into the dungeon. I want to spend a little bit of time in this initial thoughts on the dungeon, because the dungeon is the thing that this game adds that is the most new thing to Hexplore It. And it's one of the things that I was A, most excited about, and B, I am super happy to report that the dungeon minigame is awesome. I love it. It is a perfect little dungeon crawl that is encapsulated in this grand epic overland crawl. This is kind of a dream game for me. For longtime viewers of the Dungeon Dive, you've always heard me say that I wanted a game where you get to have an overland crawl, a hex crawl on one map, and then you find a dungeon, and then you can go into that dungeon and have a dungeon crawl. And this game does that. Not only does it do it, but it does it well, and it's super fun. And the dungeon is a persistent map. And so as you reveal these crypts, and there are 4 crypts numbered 1 through 4, and you need crypt keys or you need to search. There are a few different ways to open up the crypts. The main one is to get a crypt key, and you can always get your first crypt key from the first boss, the Hellhound. And the number of the crypt will correspond to an entrance down into the dungeon. So when you find your first tile, when you find your first entrance, you have to grab your dungeon tiles and you have to find a dungeon hex that has that crypt number in it. So if you went to crypt number 1, then you would enter in on one of these 1 spaces. Then as you are exploring the dungeon, you will find other crypt entrances, which they become exits. So then another way to unlock other exits or entrances is to leave the dungeon through that number. So what's really interesting, though, in the way I have my map set up is this is crypt number 1. So this always leads to space number 1. And up here in the map, I have space number 1 here, crypt number 1, but it's in the middle of a lake. And I haven't bought a canoe yet. So if I unlock this crypt, I can come up to the surface for a brief moment, look across and see this monastery over here. But I can't leave this hex until I get a canoe. So I need to go back to a village soon and buy a canoe so I can traverse some water spaces. But there are also other reasons why you want to unlock crypts. Because as you start unlocking crypts, you will unlock other abilities and you will unlock new places to turn your runes into. And as you gather runes, that's kind of like the main focus of this game is gathering different color runes. You have red, green, and blue. The expansion adds purple runes. But as you start turning these runes into different crypts and turning them in sets, then you get to raise your blood magic tier level. And as your blood magic tier level raises, you get access to all of these new blood magic spells. And most of the blood, I think all of the blood magic spells are very powerful, but they do take critical hits. You have to hurt yourself in order to use them. So once you unlock your first tier of blood magic in a crypt, you have access to these 3 spells. And then as you unlock more, you can start using the different spells from the blood magic deck. And all of these spells are different and they all have different effects and everything. And most of them are super powerful. But again, you do have to do critical damage to yourself. And most heroes can only take 5 points of critical damage before they die. So one of the best ways to get these runes, these little stones, these rune stones, is to get them within the dungeon. There are other ways to get them too, and those are through like the major quests. And those will be shown by a red rune or a blue rune, and those can be found out on the board. And you usually have to do some kind of stat test in order to get one of those. And those are like the quests in the other games of Hexplore It. but I enjoy going down into the dungeons to get them. So when you enter a dungeon, you have this dungeon placard, which gives you your kind of your turn order, because the turns are a little bit different in the dungeon. You have a certain number of points, action points, and the action points will be whoever one of your hero has the highest total of navigation and explore. And so that would be an 11 for my monk. But then I also found this crypt map, which when I have this equipped, I get a +1 to my navigation skill. So right now I have 12 points, 12 action points in the dungeon. What's really cool is there are these different dungeon cards that correspond to the different runes: blue, green, red, and purple. When you pick up one of these, you can either A, keep it for its treasure if it is treasure, or you can choose to use it for a rune. And when you collect 2 cards of the same color, you can turn those in for a rune. The purples only need 1 card to turn into a rune. So how are the runes populated? Well, as you start putting down new tiles, when you come to the edge of a tile, you can put down a new tile in order to enter that new tile. But before you do that, you roll 2d10. A green will represent like the green runes. I'm using a red to represent the red runes, and a d12 to represent the blue runes. And then you, whatever you roll, you put one of those runes down based on this hex map here. So if you roll an 8 or more on any of these on like a green, then a green does not appear. If you roll an 8 or more on any of them, they don't appear. If you roll a 1 through a 7, then one of those runes appears on a hex. So right now I have spawned 2 new tiles. I have a green rune there. I have a red rune there, a red rune there. And this blue rune actually appeared over here, right next to a boss and through a wall. So I had no way to get to this rune yet. But because of this map I found, I was able to manipulate where that rune appeared. And so I manipulated that to appear there. And so right now I have 8 points of movement left in my dungeon. And so each hex, each movement is 1 action point. And there are walls. So I'm trying to think of like what I want to do right now. I could go through this area and I could pick up this green and this red. But I'm really trying to get a blue right now because I do have this 1 blue rune that I did not use for its treasure. So I want 1 more blue rune to pick that up to turn into a blue rune, because then I will have 1 blue and 1 green. And then I can actually go out back to the crypt here, and I could turn that into a green and a blue. And then I will have turned in 1 set of runes, which will give me access to blood magic and more power-ups and more beneficial things. So I really do want that blue rune. So as you can see right here, there is a wall. However, there's a green stat check for a navigate skill. That is a secret passage. So I could spend one action point to move there. So that would drop me down to 7 more action points. And then I could spend another action point to try to open up this secret passage. And so that would be a stat test that both of my characters have to take, and one of them has to pass it. Half of your heroes have to pass each test in order to open up this secret door. So my monk has a navigate of 4. So I roll the 4 or under passes. So I would be able to open up that secret door. So then I could move another point of action there. So that's 5. And then I can move on to this blue rune. That's 4 more points, 4 more action points. And then you draw a card. And so then you'll see what this is. Okay, fortuitous find. What do we have here? Choose night or day. Reveal cards from that deck until you find a treasure. 1 hero gains it, and each hero receives 4 gold for each event card revealed. Then shuffle all the revealed cards back into the deck. Holy crap, that is amazing. Now there is 1 gun. There's this hand cannon, and I cannot remember if it's in the day deck or the night deck. I would love to have that. But I'm going to choose the day deck. So choose the day deck, and I reveal cards until we find a treasure. Okay, so let's do that here. Oh, actually though, well, see, here's the thing. So here's the crucial decision, right? I can choose to do that, or I can keep it as a blue rune. And I really want a blue rune, but I think getting a treasure and the possibility of getting a ton of gold. I'm going to spend this. I'm going to spend this and hope to get some kind of good treasure. All right, so I'm going to start flipping cards over. Okay, Hellhound, Eyes of the Fire, an event, a discovery, an event, a treasure. Okay, so here's the first treasure we found. Blaze Treaders. The sole of these boots can be made to glow a bright ambient sunlight. A command seems to turn the effect on and off at your whim. You gain regen 2. Okay, so one of my heroes, whoever equips these boots, will gain a regen to their health of 2. It means every turn I regenerate 2 health. That is awesome. The group gains a -2 bonus on stat tests made while playing green dungeon traps. Okay, so the green deck is often a lot of traps. Additionally, the group gains 4 extra time while in the dungeon. And I also get, whoever puts these boots on gets a +1 to their navigate and their explore skill. Okay, not bad. It's not the hand cannon that I wanted, but I will equip that to one of my heroes. And then also, what else do I get? One hero gains it, and each hero receives 4 gold for each event card. We only found 1 event card, so that is going to be 4 gold. So then I'm going to shuffle these back into the day deck. So hey, that was cool. That was a great find in this map. I'm going to add these bonuses and stuff to my heroes a little later. But as you can see already, this game does cool things in the dungeon. It gives you choices in how you want to spend your rewards. Do you want to take it for the rune or do you want to take it for the card? And also there are non-combat things to find in here. There are non-combat stat tests. You know, it's not just a little combat dungeon. And so this little dungeon mini game actually does like everything that I want in a dungeon crawl in its own little game. And the coolest thing about this is you can add this to any of your other existing games of Hexplore It. Also, I think it would be pretty easy to create a little mini game where you just play the dungeon. I was thinking about having a couple of the larger hexes set up where you have an entrance and a village and a monastery. And it'd be kind of like Diablo, where that would become your base. And then you just play through a series of dungeon floors or something, progressively fighting stronger and stronger bosses until eventually you find the level 8 boss, which is this is like the highest level boss in the dungeon. I think that would be a really cool way to play the game. And I'm hoping they continue to add expansions for this dungeon. I'd like to see one kind of large expansion that adds just a whole bunch of cards to the dungeon. But okay, so because I kept this, I need to spend 3 time in order to do this. So that takes me down to 1 time. Okay, so now there is this red here, so I can move 1, and then I can encounter this red card here. Let's draw the top of the red card. Red cards are often encounters. Okay, so let's see what we find here. A dangerous foe. This creature can't possibly look more threatening. What more can you do but fight? Draw and face an encounter. It is dangerous. Reinforce. It is double dangerous instead. If you vanquish it, the group gains a random rune. Oh man, this is a really deadly card here. Okay, so this is 2, add +4 to ambush. So if you had time left, if you had 4 or more time, you could spend that in order to ambush this foe. But I don't have that much time. I only have 1 time, so that goes down to 0. So now this is the last thing I can do on my turn is fight this foe. So let's draw an encounter. So we draw the top card of the red encounter deck from the base game. And okay, so it's not too bad. It is vampire bats here. So I need to fight dangerous versions of vampire bats. I'm not sure what reinforce means. I don't think I've seen that keyword yet. So let me see if I can find it real quick here. Reinforce. Reinforce effects are only applied if the group consists of 4 or more heroes. Okay, so my group consists of 2 heroes. So these vampire bats are not double dangerous. They're only single dangerous. And dangerous means that you go up 1 level. So I'm on easy right now, so I'm going up to moderate. So they're going to get +5 vitals per hero. They're going to get more Outlast, and they're going to do more damage. Now, Outlast is these vampire bats, they're a swarm. So they don't actually have health. They are represented by something called Outlast. And what Outlast means is we just have to outlast them. We have to outlast their damage output for a certain number of turns until we get their numbers down to 0. So it represents kind of us being overwhelmed by a large swarm of these creatures. And so I would have to take those guys out. I'm going to fight these guys off camera. Combat in this game is not very interesting to watch. It's very deterministic. You choose how much damage and what abilities you are going to do to the creatures. They do their attack next to you. You do some simple math and you continue on and on. It's very it's uneventful combat. And that would probably be my main criticism of the Hexplore series in general, is that the combat is never exciting. However, it's usually pretty quick, and everything else about the games is great. What I do want to do, though, is I want to pretend that we're at the top of a next turn, just so I can show you an example of how you would populate these runes in a dungeon. So we're going to pretend that it's at the top of my turn now. I have 12 points of action. So I'm going to spend 1 point of action here to go on to reveal a space here, reveal a tile. Okay, so this tile is actually an entrance or an exit to crypt number 2. And crypt number 2 on the board is all the way over here. So I entered the dungeon here at crypt number 3, but now I've found a way to exit at crypt number 2. So now I kind of have a cool shortcut, because I could come down into the dungeon here, go into 2, and then just go a little bit through to 3 in order to traverse a huge lengthy a huge length of space on the overland map. So that is another really cool thing about this dungeon being persistent, because you have ways to access other places on your overland map. So I would have to set this to a way that I could enter. Okay, so I would do that. Okay, so that's how I would set that down. Now I'm going to roll my green, red, and white die to see what kind of runes appear on this hex space. Okay, so this is a really bad roll, a 9, an 8, and a 9. That's all over 7, so no runes are in this space. Let's roll again just to see. Maybe we can... Okay, so there we have a better one. A 3, a 4, and an 8. So this would mean that a red rune would appear at hex 3, so I would put a red rune there. A green rune would appear on hex 4, so there would be a green rune there. And a blue rune is over 7, so there is no blue rune here. So that's how you spawn runes in your dungeon. But yeah, I love this dungeon minigame. It is super fun. There are so many cool things to do. One of the cool things is these green cards are often traps. And you have to do stat tests to overcome all of these really cool traps. Hidden paths, kindly spirits, shifting walls, viper pits, forlorn spirits, electrified levers. But when you overcome a trap, you can choose one of your heroes, and one of your heroes can choose one of their abilities, and they can do a stat test against that ability. And if they pass the stat test, they get a gear upgrade for that ability. That is super cool. This is a really good way to get gear upgrades pretty quickly and to overcome that Aegis gate, that ability gating that the Aegis enemies have. So really cool. That is, I love that so much there. And then also, so like, yeah, these reds, these are usually some kind of foe that you have to fight on the reds. The blues are usually treasure, and the purples are kind of a combination of all three, and they're from the expansion, but they are combinations of all three, but they are also more deadly than all three. So all kinds of really super cool things to happen in a dungeon. I love it. I love how it's persistent. I love how it connects to the overland, but it's a little distorted because it just kind of like represents this like labyrinthine kind of this maze-like quality of the dungeon. And but yeah, so far I am really liking Hexplore Volume 4, the domain of Mirza Noctis. It has a lot to offer. It has a lot of different bosses. One of the things that it does different is random bosses. So most of the hexes, when you are exploring, have a D12 symbol on them. And those are random bosses. So in most Hexplore games, you go to a red hex, it has a number. That's the level of the boss you fight, a level 3 boss. But in this one, the majority of the boss hexes are represented by a D12. And so when you go to one of those, you have to declare which boss you were fighting. So I went to one and I said, okay, I'm going to try to fight the Hellhound. And then you have to roll the D12. And then depending on what you rolled on, if that boss contains a random boss table, then you may not actually end up fighting that boss. It's kind of like a boss hunter mode where you are hunting the Hellhound. But hey, you might accidentally run into Nagaida's machine, or maybe you might accidentally run into the Dark Fae. So there is a chance that you don't find the boss you are looking for. And that could quickly escalate to where you are searching for a level 1 boss and you might end up fighting a level 4 or level 5 boss. And then you might have to hightail it out of there and try to escape. But I do really, I like that system. I think it's cool. You have a better chance of fighting the boss that you are looking for, but there always is a random chance that you might end up fighting a different boss. And there are a lot of bosses in this game. We have the Hermit, and there's Nagaida's machine. And then we have, sorry, these things are so reflective. It's really hard to get with the lighting. We have Kalen's Manor, so that's a level 3 boss. And Kish Kazul, which is a level 3 boss with 2 levels of Aegis. So you have to have some gear upgrades in order to damage him. Ozzy Osbourne here, the Mad Alchemist. That's probably the next boss I'm going to head towards because I do have a bounty quest on him, so I could get a green rune if I take him out and also get an additional crypt key and another familiar, which would be super cool. But yeah, there's a lot to like about this game. If you enjoy Hexplore It in general, you will like this game. If you really liked all of the variety of win conditions and the kind of like big sandbox nature of Sands of Shurax, this may feel like a step back in that direction because this is a very focused game. Like I said at the beginning, you have one way to win, you have one way to lose, and that's it. But having this dungeon mini game, having you needing to collect these runes to turn them into monasteries or crypts, or to sell them to villages. That does add a little bit of a sandboxy nature to this game, but this is a much more focused game than Sands of Shurax. It's also probably the slowest game. I feel like the timer that's ticking away, pushing you towards your final confrontation is very generous, and there are ways to mitigate it. And the leveling up seems a little slower. It seems that the game seems to have, they seem to have put a throttle on a little bit of everything. And so I think in each game, I think this might be one of the longer Hexplore It games, but it feels a little more relaxed. It feels a little more adventurous. Like you have more time to experience the adventure without having to worry so much about that final confrontation with Mirza Noctis. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this preliminary thoughts. I'm going to be playing this game for a long time. I love it. I'm super happy. I was a little worried about after my disappointment with Sands of Shurax. I was a little worried about how to feel about the next volume, but I'm very, very happy with it. This is a great game, and I'm having a blast playing it. So, all right, guys. Well, I'll talk to you later. Take it easy. Bye-bye.